On COVID weighs up its options. Travel restrictions, keeping schools closed and tighter COVID measures are all on the table.
Where there's risk, and there is the European Centre of Disease Control are saying, you know what, these new variants. So because of that, we'll be looking at new measures to say anyone coming from certain countries that they will have to quarantine.
We could see even more checkpoints around airports, as well as a hotel quarantine for people arriving into Ireland, and they may have to pay for it themselves.
Relatively few hotels involved here. Again, the numbers will be quite small, so I don't see it being a huge thing for the industry. Some hotels will do quite well from it.
The EU gets tough with drug maker AstraZeneca over delays in the delivery of its vaccine.
We expect the company to find solutions and to exploit all possible flexibilities to deliver swiftly.
A man will be sentenced next month for an attempted murder in Dublin in 2017. The victim was shot 5 times but survived. A couple appear in court in connection with the €1.1 million cannabis seizure over the weekend. And in sport, furlong in but Stockdale out as the Ireland squad for the Six Nations is named. Good evening. The Cabinet Subcommittee on COVID-19 has been meeting today to discuss further restrictions to curb the spread of the virus. The latest figures are due to be released at about 6:30 this evening, but the country is approaching 3,000 deaths, while almost 2,000 people are currently being treated in hospital. Tomorrow, the full Cabinet will meet to sign off on the new measures, which are likely to include the extension of Level 5 beyond the end of the month. The situation around schools and international travel into Ireland is also on the agenda today.
Ministers arrived for today's meeting of the Cabinet Subcommittee on COVID-19. It's clear that restrictions will not be lifted this time next week, but it's still to be decided how long they'll remain in place and whether to introduce more. This could include mandatory quarantine for anyone who arrives into the country without a negative PCR test, but the government has raised doubts about the effectiveness of a quarantine for all arrivals due to our open border with the north.
It'll depend a lot on what the administration in the north and in the UK will do, because what we don't want to do is give a false sense of security. We've everything sorted in Dublin Airport, but someone can fly in just as easily through Belfast and come down.
Though it hasn't ruled out more checks in the border region.
If you're 5 kilometres from the border and you don't have a good reason to be travelling south, well then that should be, in my mind, subject to the same fines, the same regulations, the same purpose, and the same, that person, if they keep going and they come to Dublin Airport again, it's that failure to comply with the regulations is the way I think we can cut down particularly international travel at this time.
The government will also be looking at whether other measures could work, such as better follow-ups using the passenger locator forms, but many political parties are in favour of a stronger approach.
Nobody should be coming here without a negative test, and furthermore we need a second test 5 days after arrival, and we need mandatory quarantine and, to keep people safe.
The subcommittee will also discuss the ongoing school closures after suggestions that they might not fully reopen until after St Patrick's Day. Delays to the AstraZeneca vaccine are also on the agenda after EU officials told the company today that it must meet its contractual obligations. We're heavily reliant on this jab for our vaccination programme to remain on schedule, and now Gardaí are warning of a scam where people are receiving calls and texts asking for private information or payment for the vaccine. Any proposals from today's meeting will be considered by full Cabinet tomorrow before a final decision is made. Nicole Gernan, Virgin Media News.
Well, for more on that meeting, let's go to Richard Chambers, who's at Government Buildings for us this evening. And Richard, and quarantining and what that might look like and when the schools might eventually reopen, all under discussion this evening.
Yes, Colette, travel really the biggest issue, I suppose, at this evening's meeting of the Cabinet Subcommittee. There have been growing calls now, as you heard in Nicole's report, for mandatory hotel-based quarantining for everybody arriving into this country. It appears the government is going to stop some way short of that. What their plan is to try and make it as awkward as possible for people considering travelling into Ireland or travelling outside of Ireland. So the main 2 issues which they'll be looking at this evening are a mandatory quarantine for people who don't produce a not detected PCR COVID test upon arrival into this country, as well as mandatory quarantine if you're coming from a COVID variant hotspot, the likes of South Africa or Brazil, for example. There will also be a provision in this for people, if they are made to quarantine in a hotel, that they will have to pay for it themselves. Minister for Transport Eamon Ryan was speaking to me on the way into the meeting. He says the government is going to get tough on travel.
The first key message to the public is, in everything, we're stopping travelling. We stay within 5 kilometres of home, and that means no international travel. And the guards will be there checking on approaches to Dublin and other airports, and to say, well, I'm sorry, if you can't show that why you're not 5k from your house, then you will be fined, you will be prosecuted. That's first, is reduce the volume. And then where there's risk, and there is the European Centre of Disease Control are saying, you know what, these new variants. So because of that, we'll be looking at new measures to say anyone coming from certain countries that they will have to quarantine.
In terms of how this is going to be enforced, then you are going to see more Gardaí out and about doing checkpoints around ports and airports, for example, as well as around the border. Eamon Ryan accepting that there is an issue with the border, with people flying into Belfast and travelling across the border into the Republic. He says that needs to be looked at. There will be fines, although Gardaí will not have the powers to turn people around if they are found to be crossing the border without an essential reason. As well as that, there will be antigen rapid tests provided for Irish hauliers who are travelling to France. That is something which has been the subject of ongoing discussions between the Irish and French governments. The schools issue, of course, is very much to the front of ministers' minds as well. Over the weekend, the Taoiseach and Micheál Martin saying that not all students and staff will be returning to classrooms before St. Patrick's Day. Some ministers believe it could be, in fact, closer to Easter by the time you do see a full return of students in the classrooms. That meeting, the Cabinet Subcommittee meeting, has been going on for over an hour and a half now. It is expected to go on for quite a number of hours this evening before a formal announcement after Cabinet tomorrow afternoon.
Richard, thank you very much for that update. Well, the Hotels Federation of Ireland says its members, especially those close to ports and airports, would be open to being used as quarantine centres. A quarantine for international passengers is one of the options on the table at today's Cabinet Subcommittee meeting. Currently, people can travel here if they have proof of a negative COVID test.
Gardaí were out at Dublin Airport today as part of a tougher crackdown on both domestic and international travel. Random checkpoints like these are being targeted around departure times to popular holiday destinations such as Spain and Portugal. While Gardaí can fine people €100 for being outside their 5 kilometre, they cannot stop them from getting on a plane. As things stand, anyone coming into the country must have a negative PCR test taken 72 hours before travelling. The government is now looking at mandatory quarantine for anyone without a clear test and for those travelling from certain hotspots such as Brazil and South Africa. However, pressure is mounting on the government to go further.
I mean that the airport, and when people are travelling to the airport, Gardaí need to be checking why they're travelling. We also need to ensure that there is mandatory quarantine for anybody coming into the country. And also, we are saying quite clearly that because of the traversing of the border, we should have checks from the police, permanent checks and indeed temporary checks because of the volume of crossings 5 kilometres inside the border with Northern Ireland.
It's understood that passengers forced to quarantine will also have to pay for their own accommodation. Private security firms are also expected to be drafted in to enforce the system, rather than Gardaí.
It's more likely to be the hotels the government are currently using, like City West, or even airport hotels in close proximity to the airport, so people aren't moving very far from an airport situation. I think the last thing you'd want would be someone having to quarantine, get in a taxi to go to quarantine. So there'd be relatively few hotels involved here. Again, the numbers will be quite small, so I don't see it being a huge thing for the industry. Some hotels will do quite well from it, but our priority is going to be making sure the staff in those hotels are protected and safe in the performance of their duty for quarantining.
Meanwhile, latest figures show that Gardaí have issued 1,500 fines in the last 2 weeks for non-essential travel. They say some people are continuing to put themselves and their loved ones at risk and are reminding the public that travel to airports and ports should only be taken for essential reasons and that holidays abroad are not deemed essential. Paul Quinn, Virgin Media News at Dublin Airport.
Well, drug maker AstraZeneca has been told to stick to its deal to supply the European Union with its COVID-19 vaccine. Last week, the company said that it wouldn't be able to make its delivery targets. The vaccine, which doesn't require ultra-cold storage, is considered a key weapon against the virus, and Ireland is expecting to receive hundreds of thousands of doses. Our economics correspondent Paul Colgan is here. And Paula, the Commission today quick to remind the company of its obligations under this agreement.
There was a lot of tough talk earlier today out of the European Commission because there's deep unease right around Europe and here in Ireland about what's happening with the AstraZeneca vaccines. The meeting was convened earlier today. The Department of Health and HSE had officials sitting across that meeting. They're hoping for clarification from AstraZeneca on what exactly is going on and how it's going to affect the vaccine rollout, because if reports are correct, then it's going to significantly slow our vaccine programme here, because they're simply not going to be able to deliver the number of doses that they'd promised to do so beginning in the middle of next month. And speeding up that vaccination programme makes all sorts of arguments about travel restrictions and so on that little bit less important, because the quicker you vaccinate a population, the less the threat from variants and so on. So the tone going in was tough. The Commission created the impression that they were going to make them stick to their contract. This is what the Commission spokesman had to say.
The President spoke to the CEO of AstraZeneca this morning by phone, Mr. Pascal Soriot, and she made it clear that she expects AstraZeneca to deliver on the contractual arrangements foreseen in the advance purchasing agreement. She reminded Mr. Soriot that the EU has invested significant amounts in the company upfront, precisely to ensure that production is ramped up even before the conditional market authorization is delivered by the European Medicines Agency. Of course, production issues can appear with a complex vaccine, but we expect the company to find solutions and to exploit all possible flexibilities to deliver swiftly.
So that meeting happened shortly after that, and it didn't go well at all. The Health Commissioner tweeted about an hour ago that they'd asked where were the doses produced and who had got them so far, but they didn't get satisfactory answers. So they've gone into a second meeting this evening with AstraZeneca to see if they can make any progress. Meanwhile today, however, there was some reassuring news on the vaccine front. There's concerns that the existing vaccines won't be able to cope with the South African variant or the British variant. Moderna, who have delivered doses here, and some people have been vaccinated with the Moderna vaccine, have said that they've run tests on the South African vaccine, and they admitted that there was a reduction in the efficacy, in the sense that they said there was a 6-fold reduction in antibodies essentially, when it comes in contact with the South African variant. But despite this, they expect it to be protective. And they went on to say that just to be on the safe side, they're investigating whether a booster might help. A third jab later in the year might reinforce that effectiveness. So that is some reassuring news, because there was concerns that the South African variant might escape vaccines. Moderna, meanwhile, says the British variant isn't a concern as far as it can tell.
All right, Paul, thank you very much for that update. Now, in other news this evening, a gunman who shot a Kinhen cartel target 5 times faces up to life in prison for attempted murder. James Mago Gately survived a drive-by shooting at a filling station in North Dublin in 2017. The 29-year-old hitman and an accomplice will be sentenced next month.
James Mago Gately was sitting in his car outside a filling station in North Dublin on May 10, 2017, when the driver of a black Lexus pulled up alongside him and shot him 5 times. The 32-year-old was shot in the chest and neck, but survived the attack thanks to a bulletproof vest after a warning from Gardaí that his life was in danger. Gardaí had foiled another plot to kill Gately in April 2017. Estonian hitman Imre Arakas was jailed for 6 years by the non-jury court for conspiring with others to murder the father of 2 in Northern Ireland. The court heard today James Gately declined to give evidence or make a victim impact statement in relation to this subsequent attempt on his life. Caelan Smith was the gunman who discharged numerous shots at his target at the Topaz station on the Clonshock Road off the M1. The 28-year-old of Quillen Court, Dunor in County Meath, was convicted of attempted murder. The maximum penalty for the offence is life, but Smith's barrister reminded the non-jury court today it wasn't mandatory. His co-accused was father of 3 Gary McAreevy, with an address at Gertnua Station Road, Castlebellingham in County Louth. Seen here leaving court previously in a navy jacket and jeans, he was convicted of acting to impede the apprehension or prosecution by assisting in burning the so-called murder car. Lawyers for Gary McAreevy asked the court to be as lenient as possible when sentencing their client. They said the 53-year-old didn't belong to any gang, had no serious crime record, and they appealed to the court to consider his family background. Lawyers for Caelan Smith, who the court heard has 36 previous convictions, asked the Special Criminal Court to consider the effect of this crime as opposed to its intent. Both men were remanded in custody today ahead of sentencing next month. Deborah Naylor, Virgin Media News at the Special Criminal Court.
A boyfriend and girlfriend have appeared before Monaghan District Court following an operation by the Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau over the weekend, during which €1.1 million worth of cannabis, cash and a semi-automatic handgun were found. 29-year-old Paul Foley from Inniskeen in County Monaghan and 26-year-old Alicia Fagan from Greenore in County Louth have been remanded in custody to appear again next week. Our crime correspondent Sarah O'Connor has more.
Judge Dennis McLaughlin, presiding here at Monaghan District Court today, heard that 29-year-old Paul Foley, with an address at Magony in Inniskeen in County Monaghan, and his girlfriend of 8 years, 26-year-old Alicia Fagan, with an address in Greenore in County Louth, were both arrested at his home in County Monaghan on Saturday during an operation by officers from the Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau. The court heard that during that operation they uncovered 56 kilograms of cannabis with an estimated street value of €1.1 million in a van on the property. They also found almost €12,000 and they also found a semi-automatic handgun along with 5 rounds of ammunition in a lunchbox buried in undergrowth. Detective Garda Gavin Curran from the Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau gave evidence that in a follow-up search at Miss Fagan's house in County Louth that they found €103,000 in cash, and they found images of that cash on her phone. Miss Fagan is charged with money laundering, and Detective Garda Curran said that it was anticipated that further serious charges would follow. Now, Detective Garda John Griffin gave evidence in relation to Paul Foley. The court heard that he's charged with possession of cannabis and possession with cannabis for sale or supply. He didn't apply for bail today, and he's been remanded in custody to appear in court again on Friday. Now, lawyers for Miss Fagan applied for bail on her behalf today. They said that she has no previous convictions, that she's deeply upset by all of this, and that she hasn't eaten in 2 days and comes from a good family. Now, Judge Dennis McLaughlin took into account the Garda objection to bail based on the serious nature of the charge against her, and he refused bail. Miss Fagan was remanded in custody to appear again next Monday.
Sarah O'Connor reporting. Now, coming up next on the news at 5:30, the EU proposes extra travel measures over concerns about new variants of COVID-19. And in sport, what next for Chelsea after sacking Frank Lampard?
Here, and here. So we need to be clever. There is no room for error. Clear communication. Okay, we are under attack.
You to send me everything, like all the minutes and any comments that there are. And Tom.
Mom, no screens at the table.
Guys, sorry, we're gonna have to talk in the morning.
Connect to what matters for less. Save up to 20% by switching to the 3 family plan. 3. Make it count.
The hybrid Suzuki Vitara. All the power of an SUV with the benefits of hybrid technology. Available with 0% APR. Order your 2-in-1 hybrid Vitara today. Suzuki, helping you drive happy.
Breastfeeding provides your baby with the best start in life. Inspired by 40 years of breast milk research, Aptamil Follow-On Milk contains vitamin D to help support their immune system. If you choose to move on, trust Ireland's #1 brand for follow-on milks. And now, introducing new Optimal Organic Follow-On Milk.
Curiosity is everywhere. Follow yours wherever it might take you. With Vodafone's super-fast gigabit broadband, now available to more people than ever before.
Just like our skin, our hair changes over time. So Pantene created the Hair Biology Collection to help control oiliness, fight unruliness, boost volume, and reduce yellow tones. With rosewater, hyaluronic acid, lotus flower, and jojoba oil for a lifetime of great hair. This is our nothing can stop us hair. Pantene, the power of hair.
At Tesco, we know how important saving is to you. That's why we've created value with you in mind. We've brought together everyday favourites, and to make shopping great value even easier, we've put a red bubble beside each and every one. For great value this dinner time, shop the red bubble ingredients for spaghetti bolognese and serve a family of 4 for less than €5. Tesco. Every little helps.
Look who's back to tell you about Quote Devil's incredible insurance deals. Yes, you're on live TV. Home and contents insurance is now reduced to only €199, including accidental damage. Whoops. And you can get a quote in just 60 seconds. Car insurance starts at only €325. And we're specialists in young driver car insurance, cover for those with convictions or previous claims. 40% of people who call to better their car, van or home insurance renewal become our customers. So
call the Quote Devil for one hell of a quote.
Thank you very much.
No matter how messy I get, just one wash and my clothes smell perfect with Surf. Accidents? Perf with Surf. Foundation face. Perf with Surf.